From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Well, we have a packed hour to close the week here on Connections. Coming up, my colleague at WXXI, Raquel Stephen, is going to join us. She has reported that both flu and measles cases are up in our area, and the flu cases especially are putting a strain on our hospital system. The measles cases, experts say, very likely related to some declining vaccination rates. We're going to talk about that. We're going to close the hour with the Strong National Museum of Play. Chris Bench is stopping by. Maybe Facebook and these social media know my age, but they all think I want an Atari for Christmas. That's what's showing up all over the place, and that's good timing. We're going to talk about toys making the National Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about possible sort of popular period toys like Atari from the 1980s. We'll have some fun there. But first, we're joined this hour by my colleague Gino Finelli, talking about an issue that has generated a lot of buzz in the last several days. Monroe County has become the first of the major counties in upstate New York to opt out of creating a registry for short-term rentals like Airbnb. And there is debate over the issue, and Gino's here to help us understand the different angles and what this is all about. Hello. Welcome back to the program, Gino Finelli.
Happy to be here.
Investigations and City Hall reporter for WXXI News. So let's start with this. The headline is Monroe County votes not to not track Airbnbs and other short-term rentals. For those not following, people know what Airbnb is, but why track? What are we talking about here?
So in 2024, the state passed a law that counties had the option by December 31st to vote to opt out of this registry system. And basically what the registry system is the county would create a system for tracking each unit that is operated by a person that is using them as Airbnbs, Vrbo, HomeAway, whatever you want to call them. And the idea here is, one, it's data. You understand the kind of the scope of how prevalent these things are in the community. A lot of what the concerns of proponents of opting into this were we have a pretty tense housing situation in Rochester. If you're trying to buy a house right now, you're probably well aware over the past few years they go quickly.
Yes, they
go.
do, yes.
They usually go for higher than asking price,
Yep.
and the amount of them, our housing stock, particularly in the city of Rochester, is relatively low. So the concern is, okay, there's always been this rumbling about investors are buying up these properties and turning them into short-term rentals, and that's kind of a major player of the issue here. But the problem with that claim is we don't have any data to support that. We don't know how many of these are actually being purchased and used as Airbnbs. So it does give you some kind of idea of what the scope of their prevalence is. And that's just pure data. As a journalist, you kind of want to see that data. You want to see the numbers of what these things look like and how much they do affect the housing market here. And the other portion of it is to the tax collection for these things is how do you accurately receive the taxes for, in Monroe County, it's a motel tax. It's 6% if you don't know the exact number of units that are here. Now, we already have a voluntary agreement with Airbnb, paid out a little bit over $1 million last year in taxes that they were willingly doing through this voluntary agreement. And I guess we're developing one with Vrbo right now, which also operates as HomeAway. And that's kind of where it stands. Okay, the reason people want this to exist is really to understand the extent of Airbnb and whether or not we are owed more, whether we're owed less. We don't really know unless we have like a full scope of what the data looks like.
And Airbnb claims to have 740 active hosts in Monroe County alone.
Yes.
Okay. And what are other counties doing about this?
So the other major counties in upstate New York, the way this bill worked was if you don't opt out by December 31st of this year, you automatically opt in. Erie County, we reached out to them, and they basically said, yeah, we had no compelling reason to opt out of this, so we just kind of went forward
with it. And again, the opt-in meaning you create a registry.
You create a registry.
Okay.
Yes, correct. Onondaga County, Albany County, the major counties in upstate New York also did the same thing.
They're creating registries.
They're creating registries. We voted to opt out.
And not create a registry.
The only major county in upstate New York to do this. And there's multiple questions of why. And, in talking to the county, me and my editor, Brian Sharp, were trying to understand, like, okay, what is the reasoning for this? And I think the thing that stood out to me is, like, Well, there really isn't any clear reasoning of why we would opt out as far as what the tax implications are. The sales tax is going through no matter what. And if we are under a voluntary agreement with Airbnb to collect the motel hotel tax, which is 6%, well, it's a voluntary agreement. And the concern that the county brought up was that if we were to create this registry and, cause some friction with Airbnb, we are jeopardizing the voluntary agreement that we already have. And I would argue that, if it's a voluntary agreement to begin with, what's stopping them from backing out in 30 days anyway?
But here's what I guess I don't understand. Why does Airbnb oppose counties having a registry of their of Airbnb properties?
It's regulation. I mean,
they just don't want the regulation?
Yeah, that would be my best guess to it. I mean, any large corporation is going to resist any kind of government tracking or regulation if they can do it.
Well, and I guess looking down the road, if we continue to see a growth in the number of these short-term rental properties, and Vrbo's on the list too, and so there's Vrbo. Airbnb is the biggest, I think.
Airbnb is by far the biggest.
By far the biggest. So there are communities like the Village of Pittsford, like other towns who have tried on their own to kind of deal with this issue, because in some places, neighbors are saying, like, we don't want all the houses on this block to be short-term rentals. We want permanent residents. We don't want just Airbnb, or we'd like some control over where Airbnb goes. So maybe, if I'm surmising, Airbnb thinks the bigger the registry, the more you know about what we're doing, the more we might get regulated out of being in certain places.
That is probably a likelihood. I mean, then there's the questions of zoning that comes up, because right now we don't know. We just don't know how many. We're going by word of mouth on where we hear these things are, and there is. This is kind of differing from any other short-term rental property, which would usually be a motel or a hotel. You know where a motel and hotel is. Their presence is pretty clear. But these are the only time you're going to find out that like a neighborhood has become a majority Airbnb neighborhood is if the neighbors start to notice and then bring it up. But still, you don't have the data to support whether or not. So I think the question that comes up to me over and over when we've been talking about this is like, what is the prevalence of them? How common are they? And we still don't know. I mean, the numbers provided by Airbnb were the number of hosts, but how many units does that host have? 700 and
740.
740. One of those could have one property, and they did say that about 80% of them are
just have one
unit. But could the other 20 have 5 each, 10 each, 15, 30, 40, 50, 100? We don't know. So it's
about getting an accurate track on just how many properties there are.
Yes.
Okay. And when you did hear from some residents, neighbors, people who have demonstrated against Airbnb on this and want a registry, I understand not everybody listening, not everybody's been locked into this issue, but for the people who are, there's some pretty passionate people who talk to you for this piece.
Yeah. There's some people that were pretty upset by this, and I think their biggest thing is, like I mentioned before, is the housing situation in the city in particular. I mean, most of the legislators that voted against opting out, which voted against not creating the registry, were city legislators, and for the people, we're talking to the head of the North Whitten Village Association. Their office is right around the corner from an Airbnb where there was a mass shooting in 2022. Now, the fact that was an Airbnb, did that cause a mass shooting to happen? I don't think anyone could reasonably argue that. But it does, this thing happened, and we would just like to know if there's, a place that's being rented out to be used for parties or whatever they might be.
Sure.
We would like to know where they are. And as far as we can tell, that house is still being used as an Airbnb as well. We drove by it. They still had the lock boxes on the door and a Pennsylvania plates car in the driveway. So we assume it still is, but don't want to assume entirely. But the point being that, what people are saying is like, look, we don't know the extent of the problem, if we want to call it a problem. We don't know the extent of the issue if we're not tracking the data. And this was a move. My position on it is it's a matter of government transparency. And if you have the option to create more transparency, reasonably you could argue that they should. And this was a case where, like, we're voting to oppose a transparency in what kind of systems are operating here.
But I think the county is also saying that they, two things. As you've already mentioned, they don't want to upset the voluntary agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't fully understand that, but I would love to talk to the county executive more because I do want to understand that
I don't
better.
fully understand that either.
Okay, but so the county executive is invited to come talk about that because I would love to know about that. But also, I think they're saying, look, the door is still open to creating this permanent registry in the future, right? I mean, I don't think they're foreclosing on that possibility permanently, are they?
No, they can opt in whenever they want to, anytime in the future. And it's a very easy comparison is recently, in recent memory, is the legalization of marijuana. When that happened, counties had the option of opting in or opting out. And if you opted out, you could always opt in later. But if you opted in, you couldn't go back and opt out later. This is a very similar kind of scenario.
Okay,
there.
got you there. Lastly, some of the legislators who want this registry and voted in the minority in this case have raised what they see as a political connection here.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Okay, so the lobbying firm for Airbnb is called Ostroff and Associates. Ostroff Associates, not And Associates. Their senior vice president is Nicholas Morelli. Nicholas Morelli is the son of Congressman Joe Morelli. Joe Morelli is a close ally and arguably a mentor to Adam Bello, the county executive. Over the past several months, Nicholas Morelli had been in conversations alongside other people at Ostroff Associates with the county administration and the attorneys there about this opt-out mechanism and whether or not they wanted a registry. They've been in conversation about this for a very long time. On May 1st of this year, County Legislator Rachel Barnhart had been hot on this. He's a very frequent critic of Adam Bello and Joe Morelli, and had brought up this concern. And about 3 hours before the vote, they handed over some documents to her, which she handed over to me, that showed that Nicholas Morelli had essentially provided the legal language for opting out of building a registry that was later used in the bill that Bello put up to opt out of creating the registry system. So,
which, by the way, this wouldn't be the first lobbyist who helped write a bill.
Absolutely not.
There are oil industry lobbyists who write energy policy bills.
Yeah, an unfortunate reality of our political system is lobbying is...
It's legal.
It's legal. It's
yes,
fine.
It's legal.
Corporations lobby all the time. I think the concern that really came up is, like, there's a very familial connection with all this stuff. And, it's not... I'm not going to sit here and say, like, yeah, and this was obvious corruption or anything like that. I don't think that anyone could reasonably say that at this point. But it does raise a question of how did this play out that I think is worth asking.
Okay, and so as we close with Gino here, the way I would describe the dynamic between the Democrats in question, Legislator Barnhart frequently sees concerns about corruption, political backroom dealing, family members, etc. And on the other hand, the Bello administration, which has dealt with that, has essentially said, look, we are a small, I can't speak for them. They're not on this program. But we're not a large city. We're not a large community. We're not New York City. And yes, it is true that Joe Morelli's son is a lobbyist essentially for Airbnb here. But the Bello administration would probably say, we're a small town. We're not just doing the bidding of Nicholas Morelli. We're doing what we think is right to regulate in this situation. And we'll let people decide if they're comfortable with that or not. So I think that's the two sides of it. People can decide for all they want, but we'll have to see going forward what happens with possible regulation of this issue. For now, Monroe County will be a standalone, it looks like, on this issue in upstate counties.
That's correct,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are the outlier.
Okay. That's where we are. Gino Finelli's piece for WXXI News. We'll link to it on our show notes. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Gino's going back to work. We're taking a brief break. We're coming right back with my colleague Raquel Stephen talking about rises in flu and measles cases.
In today's media environment, you have a lot of power. You can make a direct impact on your community by powering this public radio station with your monthly sustaining membership. Right now, what matters the most is your participation. Please start or increase your monthly donation.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson, and this is Raquel Stephen, health, equity, and community reporter and producer for WXXI News. Busy day for everybody. Very busy day for you. Thank you for popping into the studio here.
Yes, no problem. No problem at all.
I'm looking at two stories, or essentially two issues that you reported on concurrently here. So let's start with flu.
Okay. Woo. Yes.
The
let's
story
start
from
with
this
that.
week here. There's a new flu strain in circulation.
Yeah. The big
Okay.
F word. That's not the F word.
Oh no! I was like, oh boy, we're gonna have to bleep Raquel.
I know.
The flu word.
Yes,
that's
the
what
flu
you.
word.
So there's a new flu strain in circulation, and it was identified after this year's vaccine was created. So you report that experts have said it has the ability to evade the immunity provided by vaccination, causing more severe illness. So
Yes.
tough timing. And my understanding, Raquel, is this is always a moving target because they're scanning what's going on in the southern hemisphere. They see
Yes.
strains. Flu is always mutating. They
Yes.
try their best to kind of create the vaccine, the newest version that matches the current flavor of the flu. They did that, but by the time the flu got here, mutated again.
Yes. Yes.
Great.
But the positive thing is they haven't detected anything yet, but they haven't really tested for it yet in the labs, nor data has been shown yet that strain in particular is here, but it is spreading. H3N2, yes.
Okay. And, if anybody hasn't had flu, we talk about flu like stomach flu or whatever. That's not flu. Stomach flu is like you're throwing up. Flu is a respiratory issue, and it can be pretty rough. It can be severe. It does lead to some, in the very vulnerable communities, it leads to some death here.
Yes.
But I'm reading more about your reporting here. Dr. Michael Apostolakis from UR Medicine Strong Memorial Hospital and Highland Hospital says it is not unusual to see variants that are more resistant to vaccination. So this is not the first time this has
Yes.
happened. They're used to that in this community. Is that
Yes,
fair?
Yes, that's fair to say. And the vaccine is probably about 50% effective. So it is possible to still get the flu even if you're vaccinated, but it does prevent severe illness and hospitalization.
So let's listen to a little bit of what Dr. Apostolakis told Raquel Stephen. And the first one is just the doctor talking about earlier flu declaration and understanding what's going on. Let's listen.
Ever since COVID, we've seen, in general, influenza season has come earlier. And this is a couple weeks earlier, at least, than pre-COVID influenza season. Usually it's the end of December, beginning of January is when this declaration is made. So this is in a typical year earlier than most years.
So related to that, let's listen to that third piece of sound, because in this next piece, you're going to hear Dr. Apostolakis talking about what will just result in a longer overall flu season.
The concern with it coming early is that this may be a longer flu season, and the initial rise in flu could be a harbinger of a higher rate of influenza and a longer season, but it's too soon to tell. You know, how the spring is and how quickly it warms up when people can start going outside. That's when we see, people can separate more and there's less spread of respiratory viruses.
I mean, it's not what anybody wants to
To
hear,
hear,
but
yeah.
it's important to understand this right now, because starting earlier could be going longer, especially if everybody's vulnerable, but for people who've got kids, you feel like kids are germ mongers. Kids really are, aren't they?
They really are. They don't care. They have no sense of personal space, right? So it's like
We should just bubble wrap all children the entire winter.
Yeah.
You just say, come out in the spring. I mean, the reason we call it a cold is because it spreads easier
yes.
in the cold weather here. So I am not an epidemiologist, can you tell? But Dr.
convinced me.
Apostolakis, one other piece let's listen to on the subject of spread of influenza.
I'm not so sure that being early is necessarily more concerning, although it could be. As you know, influenza tends to spread more when it's colder outside and people are inside. People get the flu from each other. It's not the cold weather that gives you the flu, it's the concentration of people inside that increases the density of people and the ease of spread of influenza from person to person. And that's why it's so important to consider getting the flu vaccine if you haven't gotten it. It is the best protection we have from you getting the flu, but it's also important in keeping it from spreading to your loved ones especially that have comorbidities or are older. And if you do get the flu, it will reduce your risk of getting severe illness, meaning the likelihood of having to come to the emergency department or get admitted with the flu.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit on still the value of vaccination. I think Raquel Stephen was laughing at me listening to Dr. Apostolakis immediately explain why
Debunked.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
So
He
it doesn't
really
spread
debunked
easier
your
in the
lip.
cold. We just tend to be indoors, where and when it's not in the open air, it's not as dispersed. It's more concentrated. We spend more time indoors together in the winter. Okay.
Yes.
See, I am not an
Immediately
epidemiologist.
debunked your myth. It was hilarious. Like he heard you in live timing.
Live
but yeah, it is easier to spread when you're indoors, especially holidays. You know, our holidays. We had Thanksgiving. Now we're going to gather with family for Christmas and New Year's, and this is a time where it's easily spread. And a lot of times the symptoms, the major symptoms, are not as detectable, or people just think like, I just have the sniffles, or maybe it's my allergies, or it could be a little cough, and it could easily be influenza.
Yeah, and so a couple other parts from Raquel's reporting before we get to the measles here. I don't want anybody to think hospitals are not capable of taking care of this. In fact, Dr. Apostolakis told you that despite the challenge here, hospitals are absolutely fully capable of taking care of the community based on what they're seeing right now.
Yes. I feel like a lot of hospitals developed that tough skin, or that ability to really, what's the word I'm looking for, to really adapt, right, during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, I mean,
They
everything feels a
learned.
little bit like not. If this isn't as hard as COVID, maybe we can do it.
Like, if it's not COVID, then we definitely can handle it. So I think a lot of hospitals did gain that ability to maintain and sustain from the pandemic. So yes, if you are severely ill, Dr. Apostolakis did say, please come in and see us. We'll take care of you. But if this is something that you can manage, urgent care, you can call your primary care provider or try telehealth and see.
See, that's interesting to me here. Let's talk a little about that. So, because have you done telehealth visits? Have you ever done that?
I've done it for my son, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like it is obviously it's a lot more convenient for just about everybody involved here. But in this case, he's saying that will help system strain.
Yes. It
So,
will help, yes.
So that's just getting more people on board with. I don't know anybody who's opposed to telehealth. If you're like, do you want to go to the doctor or you want to stay home and talk?
Well, some people are traditional where they want to be
I guess
seen,
so.
right?
Yeah, I guess
There's
so.
something relieving about a relief where the doctor is, open your mouth and, really looking at you physically and telling you like nothing is severe, you're okay, just, go take these meds. I think some people are traditional in that way. I like to be able to roll over and click enter and,
Yeah.
and describe my symptoms. Sometimes you can't really describe your symptoms, and
No, I
you do
hear
need to
that.
be checked. So I prefer that. It's more convenient for telehealth visits, but I do also understand the relief that comes with being seen.
All right, and then to put a fine point on this, he is asking the public to avoid the emergency room in specific unless the illness or the cause is severe.
Is severe, yes.
Okay. And he says, get your flu shot. So there you go. That is on the subject of flu. Let's talk about measles cases. Measles cases on the rise. And we're not talking about hundreds or thousands. I think what's the number I saw in your reporting? 35.
Yeah, 35 in New York State.
In New York State.
Yes.
Confirmed cases of measles this year in the state. So it's not a huge number right now.
Yes.
Hopefully it will not become
Huge.
a huge
Well, it's
number.
pretty huge if we once said it was eliminated, right? Not completely gone, but just eliminated, not eradicated, but eliminated, which I learned is a huge difference in the medical world, to be eradicated and eliminated. So it is a possibility it will come back. That's what elimination means. But we did think it was eliminated. So 35 is significant.
You talked to Dr. Jeffrey Weinberg, who, Dr. Weinberg, a pediatric infectious disease specialist at UR Medicine, Golisano Children's Hospital. He has a lot to say about this. In fact, he was on Connections about a month or two ago, just talking about some of his frustrations on just making sure the public gets good information.
Yes.
That's why we're doing this right now. And I'm going to read a little bit of Raquel's reporting on this. Dr. Weinberg said, quote, one of the common conceptions of parents is we don't need the measles vaccine any longer because the disease isn't around. And it isn't around precisely because vaccines are so good, end quote. So that's to your point of when you hear eliminated versus eradicated, people are like, that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
It's done. It's not here, and it can never
doesn't
be here.
exist. Yes.
It can never be here, which can be especially difficult if you're not thinking that's even a possibility. I wouldn't want to be one of the 35 people. Some of them are children with measles. That can be very serious.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see kids suffer.
Yeah.
Everybody wants what's best for kids. Dr. Weinberg goes on to say, getting the disease is always worse than whatever side effects somebody has theorized about the vaccine. So what is the vaccine like? MMR. 2-dose series, right?
2 doses, yes.
Okay.
And the first dose does provide a significant amount of protection, about 93%. The second dose, you increase that to about 97%. But you still have a good bit of protection if just in case you miss the second dose or kind of slips your mind. But you do have significant amount of protection with the first dose.
Okay, so first shot, big protection. Second takes you close to 100%.
Yes.
They admit it, again, it's not 100%, but it gives you a much better chance of dealing with this.
Yes.
And I do hope that you never have to interview someone who's had measles. Have you ever had to do that?
No,
I haven't either.
I don't think anyone would things like that. People are very private when it comes to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think after what happened in Texas and then Canada had a big outbreak, there was a lot more conversation about what was going on and what it is actually like, because a lot of people will tell you, like, well, I've never seen it. Yeah. I thought it was eliminated.
Eliminated, not eradicated. Yeah.
Eliminated. But I hope I never have to, because that probably means you're talking to someone who's either been through hell themselves or maybe, God forbid, lost a kid or something like that. And that's the last thing anybody wants. So, okay, before we let you go, it is a busy.
I gotta go.
I'm
so it was sad. It was a sad.
Okay. Well, you're a busy person.
Yeah,
You've got a lot to report on.
Yeah.
Before we let you go here, there is a lot of concern in the community just about the spread of infectious diseases. And, I think back to the pandemic when people were wondering, are we going to have norms change? Are people going to wear masks all winter just kind of for the sake of it? We mostly haven't seen it, although I know a few people who mask up even when they're healthy in the winter just because they don't want to risk grabbing COVID or flu or something else here. But in terms of norms change, I haven't seen it. I mean, post-pandemic, 5 years later, in winter, you almost only see a mask if you're in a hospital. Mm-hmm. I don't know where else do we see it?
And it's funny, and it's because when we do see someone wearing a mask, we automatically think, oh, they're sick.
Exactly.
Right? That's the stigma right there. Like, we automatically think they're sick, but they're probably just being proactive. And I remember vividly during the pandemic washing my hands like I never washed my hands before.
Hands were raw,
achy. But those simple things are what our experts are really enforcing, right? That really keeps you safe during the respiratory virus season. Washing your hands, covering your mouth when you cough, and staying home when you're sick. I underscore that so much because I feel like if we feel sometimes when we get sick, right? We feel like I can handle this. I can go out. But then the person next to you, your loved one that doesn't have a strong of immune system may not be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And I really underscore that, because what you can handle doesn't mean everyone can.
Well, that part of the culture change, I do wonder if it's taken more effect. People going to work sick. Now, sometimes people feel like I can't miss work, like I can't afford it. I can't afford it myself, or I don't feel like the company would allow it or the employer would allow it. But I at least hope that we've moved the needle a little
bit,
because you're losing a lot of productivity when somebody brings germs to a full office or organization.
And I can say here at WXXI, any sniffle, they're like, hey, you gotta go. So we stand on that. We stand 10 toes down on not coming to work sick. But a lot of employers will demand that you come into work.
Yeah,
put a mask on.
I think I've gotten better about it over the years, although I could pull a tape from you from 2014, November of 2014. It is the sickest I've ever been on the air, and you can, I can barely talk.
Oh my gosh.
I was so sick. Yeah.
And what made you come in? Your duty, your sense of duty.
Well, I was younger then. No, I think it's just a culture where people feel like if I can stand up, I'm going to work.
Yes.
And I think that is changing post-pandemic, although I don't know. I wonder if there's data on that. That's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah.
But I hope it's changed.
Yeah. I believe so. I think now employers are, like you said, moving that needle and being a little bit more lenient when it comes to giving their employees some time off to feel better. Because if you're not well, you're not a productive employee.
Last thing I got for you, like the one thing in my mind I can definitely tell you that's changed is when people say to me like, oh, I still might stop over, or I may still come into work, I just have a cold. I think pre-pandemic I would have thought, okay, just have a cold. Now I feel like the cold is a coronavirus. It is a coronavirus. And the coronavirus I don't want a cold, even if it's just a quote unquote cold. I don't want it. I think I've changed my mentality about just a cold. Have you?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think it's part of like your personality, right? If you have a strong work ethic and you want to go into work and be productive, you're going to power through. Like a lot of times when we have news meetings and I know I'm not feeling well, I try to put the extra strength in my voice because I don't want you to hear that I'm sick. Because
But I don't want you hacking all over a microphone.
Yeah, right. Right.
And you don't want me hacking
and that's
over
the
a
selfishness of human nature where we're like, I'm good. I'll be
or
fine.
I can't afford to get sick.
Yes. I can't afford to miss work. And a lot of times with the Black and brown community, the Black families, the Black mom, just not knowing where that next meal will come from. I can't afford to miss work. But if you do go to work sick, then you're not a benefit to anyone.
No, I mean, but that's a powerful point of the inequality of the system. When people feel like they just can't. Like they're scared of what happens if they miss. Yeah, that's got to change somehow. Hey, thanks for popping in.
Oh, yeah, no problem. This was great.
Great work, Raquel Stephen,
Thank
reporting
you.
on flu and measles. Up to speed there. Short break. Coming right back to close the week with some fun here on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. MaryCariola.org.
This is Connections. Take your time getting set up here. Christopher Bench here. Christopher Bench is the Vice President for Collections at the Strong National Museum of Play. And if you're watching on YouTube, he has brought some stuff here. So I see Play-Doh slime. I see, Battleship. I see Trivial Pursuit. Simon, I see a Rubik's Cube. I don't know the Mini Mart stuff as well there. So get right on the microphone. Welcome. How are you?
I'm delighted to be with you here this afternoon.
You're here and healthy. You're not sick.
I'm not sick.
Coming here.
Unless you're giving me something.
No, I'm feeling great here. And this is a really, I mean, it's always a fun time of year at the Strong, but this has got to be a really fun time of year for you guys.
Well, we are toy and doll and video game central. So this is a time of year that we love to celebrate.
So we're talking about inductees first into the National Toy Hall of Fame in 2025. The hall was established 27 years ago, 1998, right?
It has some longevity now, not as long as the Baseball Hall of Fame or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but we are up there now.
The three winners were selected from a field of 12 finalists. And I'm going to read the finalists that did not get selected as toys for the Hall of Fame here. Catan, that's Settlers of Catan, I assume?
That's right.
Okay. Connect 4, not in there yet. Okay. Cornhole, Furby, which is also known as Creepy in my household. Scooter, the scooter as in just like a scooter?
Right. All sorts of brands.
Snow. Like snow outside.
That's right. If we've inducted sand in the cardboard box into the Hall of Fame, snow...
Which you have.
We have. So snow has the capability. I've heard very strong feelings on either side of the question about snow. People who are totally pro-snow and others who say that's maybe the dumbest idea you've ever had yet in the
Well,
Hall
you've
of Fame.
got sand. Did anybody say to you, like, sand is amazing, you can make sand castles and play? And then probably others were like, so you've given up, have you? No, but it's a toy, it's a play element.
It is, and if you got a sandbox for your birthday with no sand, you would be in terrible shape.
That's exactly. Well, I could not agree more with that. If you went to the beach and there was no sand,
That's right.
it'd be a tragedy. Okay, so continuing down the list, did not make it this year. Spirograph, that's the one I don't know what that is.
It came out in the mid-1960s. It's a series of interlocking cog wheels that with a pen lets you create these amazing sort of op art images.
Okay, Star Wars lightsaber, like the toy, not the real killer machine.
Like the toy, right.
Okay.
So because 1977 Star Wars, people wanted to be Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker ever after.
And they still love to have the lightsaber toys, very popular ones. So these can still be considered in the future. I
They
assume.
can be.
Okay. And finally, Tickle Me Elmo did not get in. Is that a dated thing, or is that still a thing?
People are still acquiring Tickle Me Elmo. He's had technological upgrades since his introduction in 1996, so he's even more ticklish than he was before.
Who is his big rival, Megan Mac? Who does Elmo really gets upset about? Oh, Rocco, the Rock. He really just doesn't like Rocco the Rock there. Yeah. I would love it for Elmo's sake if Rocco got into the Toy Hall of Fame before Elmo.
Ooh. You can start nominating right now, Evan.
Christopher, I think you want to go viral next year. Get Elmo's reaction when Rocco goes in first. I mean, Rocco representing rocks of all kinds, perhaps.
That's right.
Okay, that's my nomination. Now, here are the three that got in this year. First one we're going to talk about is Battleship. We got electronic Battleship here, but Battleship of all kinds, yes?
That's right. And Battleship's been around for more than a century. It was originally a pencil and paper game, often played on graph paper. And it was in 1967 that Milton Bradley made the classic plastic molded version with the carrying case that was the block so that your opponent did not see where your ships were. It has been a hit ever since, more than 100 million copies sold.
I mean, and still is. I can report when my son turned 6, it was Battleship all the time.
I just walked through the second floor of the museum on my way here and saw a mother and son playing Battleship, and I heard a lot of exclamations. "Oh, you sunk my battleship."
Can I ask you before we get to the other two winners here, or the inductees? We've got the electronic one here, but in an electronic world, in a digital world, aren't toys better if they don't have electronics?
I am a firm believer in the joys of analog play, and I think one of the things I've heard from toy makers is they sell the souped-up versions of toys to grandparents. So if it's Teddy Bear, that can also speak and tap dance because it has batteries in it. That's the grandparent model, because grandparents always want to get the best version for their kids. So some of that ramping up is aimed at the adult market rather than the kid market, who I hope still have a sense of imagination and can play without the augmented reality.
Okay, well said there. The next inductee is slime. Oh, and I see. So that's Mini Mart slime there. So you got two different kinds of slime. We have Play-Doh slime. And
There are so many slimes out there.
it's not just one slime that's getting in it. Slime in general.
It's the entire field of slime. It started in 1976 at Mattel, but it has kept on going. Yes, reach right in there, Evan.
I think this
and
is going to be a
get your-
disaster. If you're watching on YouTube here, because the one thing is like, I feel like this is like the scene in Ghostbusters where they're walking through the library and the ectoplasm is on the shelves and Bill Murray's going like, whoa, whoa. I mean, like, it's so, how am I even going to clean my hands now? This is
That is part of the joy and the downfall of slime. And we had some parents who said, no, slime can't get in. Slime ruined my living room carpet.
I mean, look at this. It is a mess.
But people love it. They love that tactile quality of it.
But what
And
do you do with this?
you basically do what you're doing, Evan, which is stretching it, grossing people out with it. Slime has been such a sensation. I don't know whether you remember when there was a global shortage of Elmer's glue during the pandemic because people were making homemade slime. And one of the basic ingredients in many recipes is Elmer's glue. And it was selling by the gallon.
I already regret this. I've got the whole thing in my hand here, slime, and as much as you say it can be fun, if this gets on anything, it's going to be a total disaster.
Keep it away from your sweater is my recommendation.
Yeah, but electronics, your couch, your counter, your toaster, how many things has slime ruined? I'm opposed to slimes and
All right.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good to have people.
You're on the record with that.
On the record. So you want people with opinions. I can't even put this back in. What am I supposed to do? Okay. Producer Megan Mack, she's like, I never thought we'd have to deal with this problem. We've got a wet wipe here. We're going to do our best here. That is really slimy. So that's slime. And the final inductee as I try to get clean here. Maybe some dry paper towels too. Oh my gosh. This is not well thought out. The last one that's on the list here is Trivial Pursuit. I love this one. I mean, it's a classic. I was surprised it wasn't in there already here.
You know, a number of people have that same reaction. And if slime is pure tactile quality, the game Trivial Pursuit is essentially the Brainiac version of the toys this year. It is the one that proved to adults in the 1980s that play at card tables and kitchen tables wasn't just for kids.
Do you have a lot of heat from the public on what you choose?
We have taken heat in a number of dimensions. The year we did not induct Pez into the National Toy Hall of Fame,
Pez.
the museum's president received a little box and he opened it up on his desk, and inside it was a decapitated horse Pez in a bed of straw. That this was very much a Godfather moment, that the Pez fans were not taking it well, that their favorite toy had not gotten in.
Are you serious?
I am absolutely serious.
This wasn't like a stunt from the museum?
No, it was somebody's heartfelt opinion that we had made a serious mistake and we needed to be told about that.
Describe it again.
It was a little box with a decapitated horse Pez, just like the horse head in the first Godfather movie, and it was on a bed of straw. And let's just say we have not had hugely positive feelings about Pez ever since as an institution.
Who sent that? Was it like John Pez who sent that?
I think it was in an no return address box.
There are some very disturbed people in this world. But there are people with very passionate feelings about toys.
Toys bring out passions in people. They feel strongly anti or strongly pro. I hear from hundreds of Breyer toy horse advocates every year, the people who are fans of Tudor electric football, that joggling electric football game. They come out in droves. I had one woman who nominated her father's toy, Barrel of Monkey, 600 times. So she gets points for filial loyalty.
But didn't get it through.
Didn't get it through.
Okay. How do you nominate again? How do you do that?
All you have to do is go to museumofplay.org, navigate yourself to the Toy Hall of Fame page, and you can start nominating for November 2026 right now.
Talking to Christopher Bench, Vice President for Collections at the Strong National Museum of Play. He's kind enough to stop by to close the week here, talk about what got into the Hall of Fame this year, bring some other toys, and I've got a list of some fun stories of, we are talking about rocks. 1975 was the Pet Rock, and that was a little before my time. I mean, I'm not the youngest person in the world, but, I feel young, and that was before me. I was born in 1979, and I never knew anybody who had a pet rock. I don't know how long this thing lasted.
It was 6 months of an absolute craze for pet rocks.
Why? What happened to our collective psyche?
What was brilliant about the pet rock was not so much the rock, but the packaging of it. When it came out in 1976 at gift shows, and it came in a carrying box with air holes in it because you don't want your pet rock to stifle. It was on a little bed of shredded wood.
You don't want your pet rock to stifle?
No, because it came with a 32-page instruction manual for how to look after your pet rock. If you think it needs to use the bathroom, put it on a piece of newspaper and let it sit there. All these things brilliantly spoofing on how we think of our pets and how we care for our pets. And if you want to train it to lie there and play dead, pet rocks are really good at that.
That's probably the best at that. But at some point, as funny as all of this is, you realize that you've paid some money for a rock, right?
It was not a lot of money. It was $3, which was more in 1976 when this became a craze. But it was one of those viral things before that was even an item that if I have one, I want to give one to my sister-in-law or to my boss or whoever after.
Okay, so is Pet Rock in the Hall of Fame?
It is not. So it
Come
can
on,
be
Rocco.
Nominee for next year, or Rocco and All Rocks.
Rocco and All Rocks representing the Pet Rocks, all just to inflame Elmo. I mean, I'm telling you. You got some listeners. If you haven't seen Elmo get upset at Rocco, it's really great. It's really, very good. I'm going down your list here. So the year I was born, the Atari 2600, and the Snoopy snow cone maker. Now snow cones, that's fun. The Atari 2600 that was after Pong. Pong was in the early 70s.
Couple years earlier.
Okay,
yes.
And so Atari comes out. That was right around the time that you start to see this competition heat up. There's ColecoVision, and this is before Nintendo really hits the scene in the mid-'80s, I think, if I'm getting the history right.
Yep, you are.
And for some reason on my social media pages, it thinks I want Atari. For this is where I'm convinced that Facebook is listening to your conversation, because my 13-year-old, he plays some video games, not a ton, but he plays some. And I kind of, there are times where I look at what he's doing, and I'm like, I think I just want to play Zelda. I think I want to play like my generation of games. I'd rather play Donkey Kong Jr. or something like that, right? And I think it can hear me because now it is advertising. You can buy for Christmas gifts, you can buy the Atari and give it to people who like old school systems, I guess.
It is a classic, and it was the system that broke into most Americans' households as a way of playing on your television set. There had been earlier systems, there had been earlier single-use games like Pong, but what made Atari so different was that you had interchangeable cartridges and you could swap out different games. And its sort of killer app was Space Invaders, that people wanted to stop dropping their quarters at the arcade and let's just do that at home. Let's make the investment once and keep on playing.
There you go. There's the Atari system. 1983, Cabbage Patch Kids came out.
They were absolute mania. People went crazy for them. They looked so different from every doll that had been successful before then. Some people call them cute homely. They are definitely not the standard form of doll beauty with their closely set eyes, their pudgy cheeks, but they had the hook that you were not just buying a doll, you were adopting a kid. And they came with their unique names and adoption papers, and people, once again, felt really strongly about that. And the media picked up on it like the pet rock, and once people heard that this is the hot toy of the year, grown-ups went crazy. They would do anything to get their Cabbage Patch Kids. There were brawls in parking lots.
Oh, boy.
I loved the prank that one radio station played announcing that I think over the Milwaukee Brewers stadium, there was going to be a B-29 that would drop Cabbage Patch dolls, and people were out there with their baseball mitts.
But it wasn't true?
It was not true.
Oh,
they were
no.
staring up at the sky with their empty baseball mitts, hoping to catch a Cabbage Patch doll from the sky.
That is a great story. I'll tell you what I remember. I remember Cabbage Patch Kids, but as a boy growing up in the mid-'80s, I remember the countercultural counterpoint to Cabbage Patch Kids, which were
The Garbage Pail Kids.
the Garbage Pail Kids. And there were collection cards. I remember the cards more than anything.
You're right.
They were trading cards at school on that.
They were a big product, and in fact, you're tapping into one of our new exhibits coming up in 2026, an exhibit called Grossology.
They were gross, Garbage Pail Kids.
If you don't get enough slime, you can come and check that out, and we're going to have examples of Garbage Pail Kids on display there.
I just want to say on behalf of my Thing One, my older son, Beyblades, he's going to be very happy is getting any mention here. He had a craze with Beyblades for a while where that was a lot of fun. That was 2002 that Beyblades came out. So that's a fun one.
They are, and they remain popular and fun. And I've just come back from the Archive of Toys at Hasbro in Rhode Island, and seeing things like Beyblades there really sends people to their childhood, whatever era that is.
Well, listeners, I hope we've sparked some nostalgia for you as we close the week with Christopher Bench, Vice President for Collections at the Strong National Museum of Play. What do you have going on now, and what do you want people to know is coming up at the Strong?
Well, of course, in the school break for the holidays, there is a winter wonderland happening at the Strong, and it's the last chance to see our fantastic display of about 50 doll houses from our collection. Our founder, Margaret Strong, loved doll houses. She had so many of them. She had some of them out on her lawn. They did not survive Rochester winters really well, but some of the outstanding doll houses from her collection and more recently are on display. It's a fantastic miniature world that you can step into.
So the Strong is, of course, open year-round, but if you've never been to the Strong, what do you want people to know about? It's for all ages, really.
It is for all ages. More than half of our attendants are people over 16, some of whom come with kids and some of whom come alone or with friends or family. Just last night, we had one of our annual happiest hours, which are grown-up only nights for adults over 21. We had, I think, about 1,500 grown-ups there playing. I say it's a wonderful opportunity to not feel guilty shoving a 7-year-old out of the way so you can run the cash register at our miniature Wegmans supermarket.
Well, if you're like me, this time of year, you can remember how, if you're fortunate like I was to have these really lovely Christmases, there was always one toy or one something that stood out, and a lot of them are on the list here that the Strong has covered or put on in collections, or you can go see them and touch them and play with them. There was one Christmas, I think it was 1987, where there was a gift that said "To Mario from Luigi," and I knew it was Super Mario 2. That was very exciting. But I also loved that wooden thing that you could tilt in the marble. You would avoid the little holes with them. I don't know what that was called.
I'm not sure the name of that, but I can picture it exactly. I can hear the sound
I can
that
hear that
marble
in my
makes.
head, and I can see myself on Christmas morning sitting next to a tree and just trying to convince myself that it was possible to get the marble all the way to the end. And it turned out it wasn't. It was a scam. But the memories are amazing. Nostalgia is very powerful. Let me close with this. What is your one toy memory that stands out the most for you?
My parents tended to be a little cheap, and I rarely got the brand name toy that I had requested. But one year in the 1960s, I had requested a motorific torture test track that ran cars around this little simulated test for new vehicles, and I loved the heck out of that one.
What was it called?
The motorific torture track.
Wow. Is that still a thing? Have you seen it at the Strong?
We have some examples of that, and I try to avoid it being delayed gratification in my job at the Strong.
Andrew, who's listening, tells me that the game I was thinking of was called Labyrinth. That might be correct. That sounds about right. Christopher Bench, have so much fun there at the Strong. Thank you for bringing the 3 new inductees, Trivial Pursuit, Slime, Battleship, in the Hall of Fame, and telling some great stories, and really for the outreach you do for families in this community. It's a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Happy holidays to you and everyone over there. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much. For the whole team at Connections and the newsroom at WXXI, it's been a busy hour here. They're doing such great work. We hope that you are members of your public media. If you are not, today's a great day to do it at WXXI.org/give. From all of us, have a great weekend. We're back with you Monday on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.